House.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff operations officer, assisted the national security team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the vice commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Pope Francis appointed bishops which were radically out of step with practicing Catholics. This is the point about the 6 out of 10 U.S. Catholic cardinals being picked by Francis. He said he wanted a church that was close to the people and had pastors that had smell of the sheep. But the people he picked were radically opposed to everything that the flock stands for. And that, Steve, and I'll hand back to you on this point, that just illustrates the degree of contempt that the hierarchy under Bergoglio had for the faithful and the gaslighting that was engaged in pretty much all of his mission, all of his public mission.
No, this is someone for his policies, hated Trump, hated MAGA, I think hated the United States of America, and was a progressive. He was a political, and for our non-Catholics, some people go, why you spend so much time with this? Well, this institution, whether you like it or not, has massive political implications, and this is one of the keystones of the progressive left globally. And that's why there's so many traditional Catholics, so many Catholics have revolted against this. And I think we're headed to a schism unless Bergoglio exited the scene, of which he did to go to his just rewards. And you should know we're working a lot behind the scenes with traditional Catholics to try to figure out a plan here. But this is going to have, because evangelical Christians and traditional Catholics are one of the central building blocks of the MAGA movement in this country, and they're unshakable. Every political movement has to have a foundational element that is rock hard and powerful and is unrelenting. That is what certain elements of the evangelical community and certain elements of the Catholic community are that, with others, but that's a foundational element that is growing.
Pope Francis leaves a divided Catholic Church behind? That's a good question. Welcome to Truth Thursday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview 2 and our X Spaces simulcast and Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku. For better or worse, the Catholic Church will get a new pope soon. In the streets of Rome, flags are flying at half-mast. Catholics worldwide are mourning Pope Francis, and let's be clear, as a Christian, I also respectfully mourn his death. Francis is remembered for his humility and deep caring for the poor. His advocates point to his compassion during the refugee crisis, his unimpeachable pro-life positions, and his attempts to confront sexual abuse within the church's walls. All good stuff. But as you just heard, Pope Francis appointed bishops who are radically out of step with practicing Catholics. His actions to align with globalism through organizations like the World Economic Forum, supporting concepts like the human trafficking of illegal immigration, the invasion of Western countries by illegal aliens intent on destroying those societies, like what's happening here and what's definitely happening in European countries, and accepting alternative lifestyles like the LGBTQ lifestyles illustrates the degree of contempt he had for the faithful. That's their opinion. Well, my guest today is Reverend Dr. Robert A. Schuller. Reverend Schuller is a pastor, author, motivational speaker who carries forward his father's vision with passion and dedication, decades of experience in ministry, and numerous books to his name, like this latest one that we're going to talk about today, God Always Wins, Divine Liberation from the Gods of the Woke. What a title. Robert focuses on equipping people to overcome challenges and embrace possibility thinking. Reverend Schuller, welcome to the Rob Maness Show, sir.
Well, thank you, Rob, for having me on your program and allowing me this privilege to be able to talk with you and your audience. And so I thank you for what you're doing.
Well, thank you, sir, for coming on. I appreciate it. Look, I have to tell you, my grandma, Lewis, on my mom's side, was
I
an
can't
avid
tell you
fan
how
of
often
her
I've heard
dad's, man.
my grandma, my mom, my dad. Yeah.
But I watched your dad all the time because of her, because I spent a lot of time at her house on weekends after
Yeah.
my dad left the military. So I'm very
Yeah,
familiar.
we were on the Arms Network station, and so we were all over the world in all the Armed Network stations, and so yeah, we had a huge following. We reached close to 40 million people a week back then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. And I was telling my audience, my live audience, before we started the video part of the show, I said, if you heard Dr. Schuler, the elder's voice, or saw his face, or saw him in the Crystal Cathedral, you would know who he was. Because, I mean, the videos and the sounds and the images of that place are still out there. And a lot of people still
very much
watch
so.
it. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. I like your book. I think it's great, very, very appropriate for the times, especially. And I wanted to talk about the Pope in the future. And I know neither one of us are Catholic. I'm a Southern Baptist. I know you're not a Catholic, but I think the Pope, whoever is the Pope, and their faith and how they present their faith really has an impact on all of Christianity, and it can be positive or negative or neutral. So I think it's important that we understand a little bit about this guy. I have to be honest, I've lived in the southeast part of Louisiana for 12 years, and the last 3 years over here in southern Mississippi. So heavily Catholic area. A lot of my friends and neighbors are practicing Catholics. And I'll be honest, the base down here were not happy with this Pope. They were not happy with the way he presented himself in a way that they said was not Christ-like, like accepting of alternative lifestyles, but not saying the words, go and sin no more, like Jesus Christ would do, and it's documented.
That's important.
And it's important. So yeah, I mean, they're mourning and being respectful, like all of us are, I think. But they have concerns as to where the church was left, and I think your book kind of talks to some of those ideas.
Well, first of all, I do want to give my condolences to all of the Catholics who feel like they've lost like an uncle or a grandfather or something. And so I want to give my condolences to all the Catholics. At the same time, I have to agree with much of what you said. The Pope was not recognized as one who really emphasized the spiritual realities of his role, in that we have to love the sinner, yes. And I think that's what he did. I'm not absolutely confident how he approached the whole LGBT community. My understanding is he blessed them, which I think is okay as long as you bless the person. But if you don't go on and say sin no more, and that's an issue, because we have to recognize the fact that we love the sinner and hate the sin. So we have to condemn the sin, but always welcome the sinner, because I promise you, every single person sitting in your church this Sunday, everyone you sat next to on Easter Sunday, every person you sit next to this coming Sunday in your church, guess what? They're a sinner. They may not be in the LGBTQ plus community, which now I think that we're referring to as the alphabet community, because there's so many letters. But we have our own sins. They're different, but yet they exist. So we always love the sinner. You love the person next to you, but you hate the sin. And that needs to be our approach. Now, whether or not he did that, I'm not knowledgeable enough to know. What I do know is, and what I have experienced, is that he was a globalist. And I am not a globalist. I believe that it is important for countries to maintain their identity and their purpose, and as a result of that, create judicatory legislation to amplify whatever they decide they're going to be. Now, I'm a capitalist and I believe in freedom. And so I believe, living in the United States of America, I live in the greatest country the world has ever seen, ever. I'm beginning with the foundations on Christianity, on Judeo-Christian ethics and morality. And as a result of that, we have a country today which is the best ever. Unfortunately, starting in the 60s, we started to lose sight of the fact that this country was based on Judeo-Christian principles, on the Ten Commandments, on the Bible, on prayer. And as a result of that, we have started a slow digression starting in the 60s that continued to pick up momentum. And by 2020, Satan did what he could to change America completely and forever and turn us into a communist country. And by the grace of God, in 2020, Trump did not win the election. You heard me right.
So you must,
the grace of God that he did not win that election. Because if he had won that election, guess who would be our president today? It'd probably be Kamala Harris.
Probably.
I mean, because he would have been a lame duck president. He didn't have the Congress. He didn't have the Senate. He didn't have his staff. He didn't know who would support him. And that 4 years that he was given by God to be able to develop the staff that he has totally transformed and is in the process of transforming our government. I've never been more excited for the tremendous changes that have been taking place than I am today. God is winning. And that's what my book is all about. God always wins. In 2020, we thought, oh, God's abandoned our country. And we sat there and lived through this for 4 years of this realm that tried to tear us apart, take our freedom away medically. They tried to turn us into cattle. Because what's the difference between us and cattle? Exactly. If they can force an injection in our arm, if the government can force an injection in our arm, we're nothing more than livestock. And that's what they did. And yet there was a lot of people who resented that and stood up against that. And now it's all coming through, and they're having their freedom confirmed. Thank you, Jesus. I mean, it's been a tough year, but
it has. The Secretary of Defense just said yesterday. The Secretary of Defense just said yesterday publicly for the first time that the COVID vaccine mandate on the military was unlawful. So we're very pleased to see that. Yeah, I mean, without Donald Trump having this 4-year hiatus, he and his staff, and I know some of them that have been working all that time preparing for this administration, we wouldn't be seeing any of the things that we've seen nearly for the last 100 days come out so fast and so accurate. They're so accurate, and I don't care. These judges are people are trying to challenge, do legal challenges. Though the judges are making such really bad decisions was because the team has really wrapped their orders and their processes and the president's movements up in the law the way it's supposed to be. That's why the justices and the judges are just looking really bad right now because of that. We got to take a break, Dr. Schuler, but when we come back, we'll hear from a Catholic bishop on the opening video. He's talking about the immigration and the invasion that's happening in Europe. And this is a guy that's being talked about as a possible candidate to replace Pope Francis, is why we're looking at him. But we'll continue with Dr. Schuler talking about his book, God Always Wins, the liberation from the gods of woke. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show.
Yes, this is very serious. Now we are witnessing an invasion. They are not refugees. No, this is an invasion of mass Islamization of Europe, which already went on for at minimum 50, 60 years, the Islamization in Europe. But now it is in mass. It is very evident. And so this is a global political agenda by the powerful of the world to destroy Europe culturally and religiously. I mean, to destroy Christianity ultimately in Europe, with the help of the massive Islamic population. And I was reading recently an article of a sociologist who made a calculation that maybe in 30 or 40 years, when it's now going on, so the majority of the population of Europe will be Islamic. Europe will be Islamic when this will go on, because the European people have almost no children, 1 or 2. The Muslims there, they have 5, 6 to 10 children. And so it is, you can only make mathematics, and then you can see that they will be in the majority.
Welcome back to the Rob Beta Show. It's Truth Thursday here on the show, and we're live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. And my guest is Dr. Robert Schuller, author of the book God Always Wins, Liberation from the Gods of Woke. And Dr. Schuller, that was a bishop from Europe, I'm going to butcher his name, Athanasius Schneider, kind of touching on exactly what you were talking about in the first segment, that in this case in Europe, illegal immigration and pro-migration politicians have changed the face of Europe. And what he said at the end there is something I think a lot of people miss, is the birth rates amongst Islamist families versus European families. And in our case, in America, for Americans are very low. But these folks come in, they're having 6, 10 kids. So, they're going to outnumber, in that case, he's talking about European countries, and be able to take over their governments. And those governments are not really designed to withstand an onslaught from fundamental Islam, are they?
So 10 years ago, I read an article on the whole immigration of Muslims into Europe. And back then they said that it has reached the tipping point that it's no going back. Europe will become a Muslim continent. And this was like 10 years ago that I read this article. Now, I can't verify it. I don't know the numbers. That's not my expertise. What is my expertise is theology and Bible and understanding how that applies to us as individuals. And what I know is that one of the gods of the woke is anti-family. They don't want us to have family. And as a result of that, they want to depopulate the globe. I think most of your listeners have probably seen the TED Talk of Bill Gates, saying that he wants to reduce the population, and he will reduce the population if he's successful with his vaccinations and the like. That's one of the gods of the woke, is to depopulate, that God can't feed his people, that God won't take care of his people. And so we have to depopulate. And yet that's not what the Bible tells us. The Bible tells us that we have to be fruitful and multiply. And I believe that God wants us to have families and wants us to have children. By the grace of God, I have 4 children, and my children have had 4 children. So I now have 9 grandchildren, and I know I'll probably have a couple more before they're finished. So again, what we need to do in order to understand one of the promises of God and fulfill and receive the blessings of God is we have to understand that it is a blessing for us to have children. They're a lot of work, yes, but it is the greatest blessing you can ever possibly have. That's why God tells us to be fruitful and multiply. And today, one of the gods of the woke, like I said, is anti-family. So they discourage marriage. They discourage children. they discourage families creating children and enjoying life. But in my book, I talk all about it. I've done a lot of research on the whole topic, and that's one of the reasons why the Muslim faith is increasing in numbers, because they do have an understanding of Allah, which I don't believe is the God that it isn't Yahweh, it isn't the I Am, it is not the one who appeared before Moses, and it's not who Jesus said he is. Jesus is the I Am. He is the light of the world. He is the salvation for our souls. But we have to remember that as we focus on the great I Am, Yahweh, we will make a difference. And one of the things that I want to say is that I understand there is a revival taking place among Muslims. In other words, Jesus is actually appearing to Muslims and saying, why are you persecuting me? And there's a tremendous amount of Muslims becoming Christians. It's a beautiful thing to behold. And I know that God always wins. And even though all the sociologists, even though it looks like there is no hope, God always wins.
He does. He does. And I'm glad you brought that up that way, because they're really anti-God, the wokists, right? And you tell a story at the beginning of your book about the first plague that hit the Egyptian pharaohs and the Egyptians when God was trying to free the Jewish people from bondage there. Why did you choose that story?
Well, first of all, my book is how do we find freedom? How does God create freedom among his people? And so I said, okay, where do we see God's act where he really did bring divine liberation? And of course, it's the Exodus. It's where God went to Egypt, and after the Israelites had been in bondage for 400 years. That's, we're going to be celebrating 250-year anniversary here next year in the U.S. So think about that. That's 250. These people were in bondage in Egypt for 400 years. In 400 years, they forgot who God was. They forgot the God who appeared in a burning bush to Moses and said, I am, which is the translation of Yahweh. I am, not I was, I'm not going to be, I am, meaning he is present, he is everywhere, he is omnipresent, he's omniscient, he is all loving, he's all caring, he's everything. So after 400 years of not having the written word or knowing what was going on, they lost sight of who God was, and they started worshiping the idols of the Egyptians, because that's what happens. That is the natural course of our human nature. If we lose sight of who God is, we lose sight of Yahweh, that he is our provider, our sustainer, what happens to us as individuals and as people is we create a new pantheon. We create our own pantheon of gods to replace the God who created the heavens and the earth, the God who created us, the God who is a sustainer and provider. And so in fear, we create this pantheon. Well, in Egypt, there was a pantheon of 1,200 gods, all approaching different types of life, and some of them being incorporated through conquering city-states and things around it. But every single plague that God sent upon the Egyptians in order to free his people were attacks on the Egyptian gods themselves. So that's what he was doing. He was attacking the Egyptian gods, saying, I'm God. These things are just things you created in your mind out of fear in order to find some kind of sustenance and some kind of life. Then then the Pharaoh took those and used them to control the people, because that's how oligarchs continue to control the masses. They create these false gods. They create these pantheons. Here, believe in this, and then you can and instill fear. So the first one was turning the Nile River into blood, and that's the very first one. Well, Jesus comes along, and the way we conquer the gods of the woke isn't with plagues. God doesn't work that way anymore. Everything changed with the birth and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So in Romans 10:9, we read that if you confess with your mouth, if you speak with your mouth and say, Jesus is Lord, and then believe in your heart that he rose from the dead, you will be saved. So that's how we find our salvation. That's how we find our freedom. That's how we find our hope. That's how we find our future. So Jesus has these I am statements explaining who he is, and each one of those I am statements attack the various created gods that we created in our mind, and it's the gods of the woke developed through false fake science, which I call a pantheon of scientism. And there is an I am statement for every single one of these to conquer and destroy the gods of the woke with the presence and the reality of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? The people that say God doesn't exist and those kind of things, when you start peeling all that away, and you've got a story from an author that wrote books like The Case for Christ, and that series of books, who was an atheist. He talks about how if you eliminate God, you eliminate a lot of things that go away, and one of them is science. And we see that in the wokeism, don't we? That they're eliminating science. Transgenderism does that.
It's just mind-boggling to me how they can twist science to create their own agendas. The first time I saw that for myself was in the health arena. I believe that there are two forms of health. The health where God wants us to find healing, and we allow our bodies to heal ourselves. And then there's the mainline medical model today, where we see health is not from the inside. The body can't heal itself, but instead it is managed sickness. And so the science is created to support managed sickness with studies that show that if you have this drug and you take this drug for the rest of your life, and by the way, your insurance will pay for it, so it doesn't cost you anything, but just take it for the rest of your life, and then you will live. On the other hand, all they're doing is masking the warning light that's coming up when we have symptoms in our body. It's a warning light that something needs to be changed. And so if you take a look at your body and say, okay, why am I having this imbalance? Do I need insulin? Or is there something I can do to help my pancreas start working correctly so I don't have to take insulin? Maybe if I lose a little weight, maybe if I start eating healthier, maybe if I start giving my body the nutrients it needs, it might start functioning better. And I don't need to take these drugs for the rest of my life. Right. But the pharmaceutical companies, which have taken over and controlled the FDA, the CDC, and given them studies which have not been accurate and not conclusive, but supports their desires, we have seen the complete annihilation of our government agencies that were created to protect us, now supporting big pharma, big ag, and as a result of that, destroying our health. I've read most of what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has written. I've read its materials. I got into the whole awake motive, you might say, back in the 80s with and through health and wellness. And I could go on talking for a couple hours about this, how it's affected my health and the health of my family. But I just want us to realize that scientism is taking and using science to manipulate the masses for personal gain and to control the masses so that they don't have faith in God. They no longer believe that God can heal them or God can win. And as a result of that, they lose the reality of God's love in their lives.
That's amazing, sir. Well, I know I got to let you go because you are getting booked everywhere and people want you on their show. But where do you want folks to go to buy the book? Because I recommend it, folks. You got to get a copy of this book. It really fits well into our times, especially when with the revival on Christianity that's happening today. It's very important to get that. Where do you want them to go, sir?
You can go to Amazon. You can buy it there. You can go to the publisher's website, which is archwaypublishing.com. You can buy it there. I think it's available most everywhere books are sold. And so pick up a copy. God Always Wins, Divine Liberation from the Gods of the Woke. And I think you'll learn something as you go through and discover the 10 different plagues that God sent on Egypt, conquered all of the gods that we faced, that the Israelites faced, and they each one has a correlation with one of the woke gods, because this is a spiritual battle that we have been fighting and that we are coming out of now, this spiritual battle, but the battle isn't over, it continues. Here in the state of California, for instance, there is I think it's AB 48, which is taking all the funding away from homeschoolers here in the state of California, because the homeschoolers aren't following in line and doing what the Governor Newsom wants them to do. So he's going to defund them and put them back in the schools. But anyway, those fights continue. We see it taking place in the Supreme Court with the rulings right now that are taking place regarding libraries and what the kids are required to read. So the battle isn't over. It is a spiritual battle, and the fact we have to remember always is God always wins, right?
That's right. God always wins. He certainly does. Well, thank you so much, Reverend Schuller. We appreciate it. God bless you and your family and your ministry.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you, Colonel.
And we'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday. We're going to open mic Thursday for the rest of the show, but we will continue to hear from Dr. Schuller. I've got a couple of videos in the rest of the show. We'll be right back.
But with Brandon, it's always cutting edge stuff happening in the world, and it's not just from the political angle, because you can get that on other platforms, but it's always from the biblical angle. So you're dealing with a guy that loves Jesus, you're dealing with a guy that's very intelligent, you're dealing with a guy that is cutting edge conservatism, and you're dealing with a guy that wants to be biblical all at the same time. And so for that reason alone, I hope many, many people will not just lift up his ministry in prayer, but will also financially get behind it, because from the angle I'm trying to describe, he really is the only game in town. And we desperately need it in these last days. Can I get an amen to that?
We have to mention that Pope Francis was controversial in a sense to where, maybe he had some different stances when it came to the LGBTQ community, globalism, immigration. What are your thoughts to the people today who said maybe Pope Francis wasn't you know, the best pope we've seen in quite some time. What is your advice for those people who may be seeing some differences with the pope?
My belief is that he was stuck in a certain culture, and he didn't understand what Donald Trump understands as far as the capture. In my book, God Always Wins, I talk about how scientism has really taken over the world, and scientism is believing in a false science. So, for instance, Pope Francis was very interested in carbon. And he thought he was led to believe that carbon was going to ruin the world, and it has caused the current environmental disasters that plague the world today. I think there's a lot of bad science, and that we need to free our scientists to be able to give us the proper information so we can make good decisions, because many people are susceptible to this bad science. That's why I've been really a Maha kind of a person. I got into the whole new political venue through health and wellness, which I started and had an awareness of in the 80s. And so when Kennedy joined Trump, I was thrilled because I realized that America is going to become healthy again, because we're going to get our science back. Real good science. And I think he was a victim of bad science. And I call it scientism.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that. So I'm glad you made that point. But I want to go.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday, and that was Reverend Dr. Robert Schuller, who was a guest during the first half of the show. And we'll continue with some video clips of his talking about his book, God Always Wins, Divine Liberation from the Gods of Woke. And it's very appropriate. The show has been about Pope Francis and the future of the leadership of the church and those kind of things. Even though I'm not a Catholic, but I'm a Christian, and I know that popes have an influence over the rest of Christianity, and more importantly, popes that are loyal to the faith, as if, trying to live like Jesus Christ would live, which is what we're all given the charge to try to do as Christians, has an impact on the rest of Christianity. So it's an important subject. Who's going to be the next pope is important to all of us that are of the Christian faith. That it's all interwoven in our American society, and worth exploring and talking about. So we're going to have open mic for the rest of the show. Let's go over to our live audience. Patriot Rob is our host over there. What do we got, Rob? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. By oneness, you mean a unification of all the Christian denominations? Is that what you're talking about? Mm. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. I actually had not heard that, be honest with you, but I don't get around everywhere either. But the Bible is very clear, and when people ask me for what I think about situations like this, I always go back. Hey, I am a Bible believing Christian. I get outside of my denomination, and I go right to the Bible and if it's in the Bible that God gave us that to live by, then you need to be following what's in the Bible. And in the New Testament, with these stories, it's called referred to sometimes as the triune God. It's God. Jesus is God. The Holy Spirit is God, and God the Father is God. They're all the same power, and that power created the universe. That power created the heavens and the earth. That power created his son, Jesus Christ, who is him, and sent him down to us as to walk with us as human beings on the earth in order to fulfill the mission that he gave us, because he saw that man was flawed and needed saving, so he sent Jesus Christ to do that, and Jesus fulfilled prophecies from way back in the Old Testament that my wife is always telling me, you always have to remember the Old Testament and what's been said and done there, because it's linked to what we believe as Christians. And we know as Christians from the Bible that there's God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. And that is the way it is. So I'm not sure where they're coming from, other than they've chosen to eliminate it. And that happens sometimes, human beings. And that's one of the things I liked about Dr. Schuler's book, is that he talks about that, is that we start questioning God. And through that questioning God, even Moses questioned God, even after he saw him at the burning bush and heard him and felt him, after he saw him when he gave him the tablets of the Ten Commandments. After he broke the rock open and water came out, after all the miracles of escaping Egypt that occurred and getting to the promised land, Moses still questioned God, because it's human nature to do that. And that's what leads us down these paths of error. And my answer to that is try to come back to the Bible, read what's in the Bible, read what Jesus said, read what the disciples have written down about it, what the apostles like Paul have written down about it, and that God has combined all that into one source called the Holy Bible for us to use as a guide, because it's the truth. And that's the last thing I'll say before we go to this break. The truth, in search of the truth. Science used to be in search of the truth. Dr. Schuler referred to what we're seeing now, like this transgenderism, some aspects of LGBTQ, and a whole host of other things, is scientism, trying to be transformed into something that science is not. And you end up searching and receiving falsehoods being presented as truth. And that's because God's been taken out of it. And God is science. Once you realize that, you go back to the science, then you have a better understanding of what the truth actually is, and know that you have to continually search for the truth. And science is one of those paths to do that. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday, and we're going to tell the truth, even if it hurts sometimes.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
Pope Francis has just passed away, and I want to share some of the most prophetic things that he said during his papacy. At an Italian family association, Pope Francis addressed abortion. He said, last century, the whole world was scandalized by what the Nazis did to purify the race. Today, we do the same thing, but with white gloves. The Pope was urging families to accept children as God gives them to us and not abort them. Pope Francis also made comments at a conference likening abortion to hiring a hitman. Pope Francis says, it is not lawful. Never, ever eliminate a human life to solve a problem. Pope Francis was passionately pro-life and would often speak against it, even if the media didn't report it enough. Another topic that Pope Francis spoke frequently about was reproductive technologies like surrogacy. Pope Francis urged a ban on surrogacy, calling it despicable. Pope Francis said that the unborn child must not be turned into an object of trafficking. A child, he said, should never be the basis of a commercial contract, and called for a global ban on surrogacy to prohibit this practice universally. He understood that children deserve their mother and it should not be intentionally separated from their mother. Obviously, adoption is a different situation, but in surrogacy, the child is intentionally created to be taken away from his or her mother. So for all of the controversy around Pope Francis's papacy, I am particularly grateful for his stalwart defense of human life from womb to tomb.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday. Our guest the first half hour was Dr. Robert Schuller, author of God Always Wins, The Divine Liberation from the Gods of Woke, and we're continuing that discussion. And, Pope Francis is not a non-controversial figure, especially amongst the Catholic lay people, the churchgoers that I know down here in southeastern Louisiana and southern Mississippi. They were not very happy with this Pope. But in this particular case, I wanted to show that video. That's from Lila Rose, the staunchest pro-life advocate in America that I have ever met. And she's right. We have to give credit where credit's due, but that doesn't mean that we should follow everything this guy did, because he was wrong, in my opinion, in a lot of things when it comes to Christianity and his own faith, and more importantly, the Catholic base, the churchgoers that surround me. I can't find one that is not uncomfortable with the way this guy led the church, and he left it kind of divided in their opinion. So let's go over to the audience. It's open mic. And Rob, you're our host over there. What do we got?
We got Charlie Sue, Colonel.
Great. Good afternoon, Rob and Grand Panda, and good afternoon, Colonel Rob Maness. I have a question regarding the topic, and I'm grateful that you brought this topic up today. When we're talking about the Pope and a lot of his woke ideology, I wonder if people know, such as yourself, for example, that when we submit resolutions, for example, for legislative priorities each session in our House, that you can also submit resolutions to the Vatican. Not that the Pope and or the Vatican will follow them, but my question is have you ever submitted a resolution for the Pope? And if so, do you have one that I can submit on your behalf or on the behalf of the audience?
I have not. I wasn't aware of that. I'm not a Catholic. I'm a Protestant, but I am a Christian. So I have a dog in this hunt, so to speak, as far as Christianity goes and Catholicism. But if somebody does have one out there, I'm happy to have them share it with me, and I can share it with you, Charlie Sue.
Absolutely. Or I should say more so on behalf of Christians, because essentially the Pope is over the Catholic Church itself, but he signifies, or he's supposed to signify conservative values and principles, which we did not see in this last Pope. So those resolutions need to be submitted on behalf of, the Christians in society. And I think that's a reflection of our ideas and our values. So I want to just share that with yourself as well as with others, that we can submit resolutions just as we do within our legislation.
Yeah, how does that work? Is there a website that folks can go to, or a mailing address, or?
Actually, there's actual apostolic, our news offices throughout the nation, but then it actually goes directly to the Vatican. I'll put it in the comment so folks can go ahead and submit their formal letters, and it actually goes to the Pope's administration, not to the Pope. There's always interns, and I'll submit the address as well. There's a direct address at the Vatican. Great question.
Yeah, unfortunately, in political world, which the Vatican is part of it, the Pope's not just a priest and the leader of the church; he's also the head of state. So you're always going to have political staff layers and interns that you have to deal with. But that's great. I wasn't aware of that. I'm talking about this today, by the way, Charlie Sue. I don't know if you heard the whole show, because I agree with what you said. The Pope has an influence on all of Christianity, even though he's the leader of the Catholic Church. Look, I've stood in St. Peter's Square. I got to see John Paul II preach from the window there one Easter, because God put me there and got me stuck over a weekend when I was in the military. And it was a humbling experience, and to walk into the basilica, and I didn't think about whether I was Catholic or not. I was thinking about that Peter had walked this area, that Paul had been imprisoned in this area and preached in this area and recorded the things that he has in the Bible, and all of them have and carried the story of Jesus Christ to outside of the Middle East and the land of Israel and into the rest of the world, and that really was the beginning of that. So yeah, you're exactly right. We got another hand up there, Rob. Go ahead.
Nathan, Colonel. We have Nathan.
Hey, good afternoon, Colonel Rox. Rob. I wanted to add to one of the previous speakers, and then also add a question as well. In the Bible, it does say in 1 Corinthians 6:19-20 that the Spirit lives within our bodies as God does within this temple. And if the Bible's saying that the Spirit lives within each of us, I think that would be the Holy Spirit, and we're all fractals of that. My question is that with the proceeding that happened, there were some people with robes, and I think you already answered it, Colonel, about St. Peter's Square. I noticed the upside down cross, and I heard that had some relation to St. Peter being hung upside down. And it just seems very interesting. I don't know if we know more about that, or that's all I got. Thanks.
Well, when he was crucified, the cross was upside down, as opposed to the way it was when Jesus Christ was crucified and other Roman crucifixions that occurred, and that's where that symbology comes from. But yeah, the Holy we received the Holy Spirit when we profess in faith that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that was born of the Virgin Mary, walked the earth, preached, set the example, and then died on the cross and was resurrected 3 days later. That is the ultimate reception of God into our lives. So I can't disagree with that. It's right there in the Bible, and I refer you back to the Bible. We've got another clip I want to show real quick of Dr. Schuler. And that way I will have been able to say, even though he couldn't stay the whole time in person, I had him on the whole show. So here's another one. Go ahead and run clip 5.
We have to mention that Pope Francis was controversial in a sense to where, maybe he had some different stances when it came to the LGBTQ community, globalism, immigration. What are your thoughts to the people today who said maybe Pope Francis wasn't, the best Pope we've seen in quite some time? What is your advice for those people who may be seeing some differences with the Pope?
My belief is that he was stuck in a certain culture, and he didn't understand what Donald Trump understands as far as the capture. In my book, God Always Wins, I talk about how scientism has really taken over the world, and scientism is believing in a false science. So, for instance, Pope Francis was very interested in carbon. And he thought he was led to believe that carbon was going to ruin the world, and has caused the current environmental disasters that plague the world today. I think there's a lot of bad science, and that we need to free our scientists to be able to give us the proper information so we can make good decisions, because many people are susceptible to this bad science. That's why I've been really a Maha.
Yeah, we were going to run a different clip. See if you can set that up, Reagan, and get that loaded for us. But sorry about that, folks. You already saw that, but it's worth talking about that this Pope, he did some things right, like pro-life, but a lot of what he did really flies in the face of what normal, not just Catholics, but Christians, Bible-believing Christians and Catholics understand as to what our approach should be to a lot of these issues, especially the woke issues and globalism, those kind of things. Go ahead and run that clip 5, Reagan.
That this is the way you want to go out. We saw J.D. Vance, the vice president, visiting with him in private yesterday on Easter Sunday, and he passed just hours later. Now, the left, if you look on social media, they're slamming J.D. Vance for making that visit. And of course, they'll blame, something J.D. Vance said, or that he just has, bad vibes that he brought with him. But I see it as this. Here are two people who just recently, Reverend, had, these differences on immigration, and they were very public with each other on their differences on immigration. And for the two to meet on Easter Sunday, shake hands, smile, and just honor their friendship, that's what it's all about. And to me, that's how I see it, is that you can put aside your differences, you can come together for the betterment of the world, and both are believers. And so Pope Francis could die peacefully then. That's how I see it. What are your views?
Yeah, I believe that it's really important for us to be open to the other side, to talk to the other side, because you don't make peace with your friends. You make peace with your enemies, which means you have to go out and you have to talk to the other party. We need to, as conservatives, we need to talk to liberals, and liberals need to talk to us, and we need to find common ground. And that's a real difficult thing in our society today, because we are so divided. And I believe one of the reasons we're so divided is because the false science has been used to be able to take and twist the truth. And that's why in my book, God Always Wins, Divine Liberation from the Gods of the Woke, God Always Wins, is that we can come back to the real science, we can study the reality, and we can find out that there is such thing as good science that will give us guidance and direction to be able to come together under good science, as opposed to having the science divide us.
I agree. And when it comes to the country, we are one nation under God. And we're not seeing God in our public places like we used to. We're not seeing God in our family homes like we used to generations ago.
Welcome back. And I think that's a great place to end this discussion. And that is, we need to see God in our public places more. We need to encourage folks that are coming to Christianity or thinking about coming to Christianity to find the answers to their questions in the Bible. And teach each other that we can talk to each other. Christ set the example. He would sit down and eat with anybody, but he would also hold them accountable whenever that exchange was over and say, go and sin no more. I have to remember that. I'm Rob Maness. Monday is War Monday, and I'll see you then on Worldview Tube.
You're watching Worldview Tube, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.